Today's memory verse focus is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Let's read it together. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. When Pastor Brian asked me to help with this verse, I was quick to say yes because this verse and I go way back. If you were a parent in the early 90s, or if you grew up in the early 90s, you may be familiar with this guy, Steve Green. He's a Christian musician, but he recorded several Bible memory verse albums for children called Hide 'Em in Your Heart. My mom used to play these cassette tapes whenever the four of us kids were hauling around Indianapolis in our gigantic Astro van. I'm sure she did it for her own sanity, to drown out our talking and bickering in the back seat, but I can sing you and say the verses to every track on both side A and side B of all of his albums. So it definitely did the trick in committing scripture to memory. One of the songs on there is, of course, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And just so you can experience this earworm with me, I'm going to play it and sing it for you now. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. Now that we all know this verse, thanks to this catchy song, let's figure out what it actually means. When I think of the words trust in the Lord, my mind immediately pictures two things: a rope and Aladdin on a magic carpet. Have you ever been rock climbing? If you are going about it safely, you get harnessed in and clipped to a rope. It takes a lot of strength to pull yourself up the face of a rock wall, hanging on by your fingertips and toes. But no worries, because if you fall, that's what the harness is for. The rope attached to your harness, though, is key for your safety. It definitely matters who is on the other end of the rope, standing safely on solid ground. That person is called the belayer. If they are not watching you constantly, with a proper tension on the rope, they won't be ready to catch you and slowly lower you to the ground if you fall. I think God is a belayer in our life. Life is sometimes hard work and a fight. And even when we feel we are climbing to the top of our jobs, our finances, and our relationships, we are bound to fall a little at some point. Can we trust that God's eyes are on us, ready to slowly lower us if we fall? Have you ever seen Aladdin? I want to show you this brief clip.
Here you are!
They're after me! They're after you? Oh, my father must have sent them to...
Do you trust me?
What?
Do you trust me?
Yes.
Then jump!
How are you doing that?
It's a magic carpet.
It's lovely.
You don't want to go for a ride, do you? We could get out of the palace, see the world.
Is it safe?
Sure, do you trust me?
What?
Do you trust me?
Yes.
In both instances, when they fell off the building and when they rode on the magic carpet, Aladdin was right there with Jasmine the entire time. It's the same with God. When we trust in Him, sometimes when we jump into something new, like a new job, a new business adventure, a new relationship, sometimes we fall, but sometimes we fly. In either case, God is right there with us, no matter what. Let's look at the second part of this verse. Lean not on your own understanding. I liked this verse so much as a kid that when I got to confirmation in 8th grade, I chose Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 as my confirmation verse. At my church growing up, confirmation was a really big deal. One of the things we had to do in order to be confirmed was to share our faith testimony in church in front of everyone and create a banner to illustrate our verses. We chose our verses early in 8th grade, so by the time I had to actually give my public testimony, this verse held a new meaning, and it changed what I would say. For you see, just 1 month before I was set to do this public testimony in my church, my grandfather suddenly passed away. This unfortunately wasn't my first experience with death, but it was perhaps the most difficult in my life at that point because it was such a surprise. In 8th grade, I was at the height of involvement in my church. I served in the nursery, I sang in the choir, I helped with VBS, I went to youth group and Sunday school, and still God let this horrible thing happen to me and to my family. It was from this experience that I really learned what it meant to lean not on my own understanding. I couldn't understand why such a death had to happen, but I knew I had to trust God anyway. He proved to be trustworthy. He held my family through that time of grief and brought us through it. A lack of trust leads to a lack of faith. My understanding at age 13 that because I had done so much for the church meant that it was unfair that my grandpa died showed me just how much I was lacking in trust. In Hebrews chapter 11, it says that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance in what we cannot see. The rest of the chapter in Hebrews outlines a ton of people from biblical times who trusted God, even through immense hardships. Joseph was sold as a slave and still trusted God. Abraham was asked to murder his own son as a sacrifice to God, and yet he still trusted God. Daniel was almost eaten by lions and still trusted God. Job's entire fortune, family, and home was destroyed, and he still trusted God. The Bible doesn't promise us a life that will be easy, but it does promise that when we trust God, even when we don't understand what is happening to us, He will be with us through it all. Verse 6 is, "In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths." Some versions say He will make your paths straight. But I would argue that God's plan for our lives and the paths that we are on will never be completely straight. If we are really trusting God with our lives, we have to just know that God will be taking us on the scenic route. There is a common expression that if you want to make God laugh, tell Him your plans. We have all had plans canceled or changed this summer. This time we are living in is filled with fear, political arguing, unrest, and apprehension, and it is a perfect example of part of that scenic route we are all on. We don't know God's reasons for everything that has happened in 2020. We don't understand them, and we definitely don't like them. But if we trust Him, we know that His plan will unfold some way, somehow. I have struggled this summer with worrying about what school will look like in September. For me and for other teachers, there's a lot of unknown things happening. I realized about 3 weeks ago that worrying is a sign of a lack of trust in God. So I wrote a plan of one thing I could pray about every day until school started, something that I was really worried about with school. I acknowledged that God is in control, and I submitted to that in prayer. And I know that God will direct the path of what schools look like in September. I encourage you to reflect this week on what worries you have, because that is where you are not trusting God. Write a list of everything that is currently worrying you and commit to praying about it instead. God bless you.